Well, let's call this meeting to order. It's about 4 or 5 after noon here right now. And we'll do introductions. I'm Pete Peterson, I'm the chair.
Christopher Constant.
Suzanne LaFrance.
Jamie Allard.
Barbara Jones. Erica McConnell.
And as long as we don't have 100 people here,
Eugene Crow Haberman.
Carolyn Hall.
Jamie Hartman, interpreter. Gina Ashman, interpreter.
okay. Mr. Gates is not here yet, but I believe he might be coming. Someone's on the phone? Crystal.
Yes, this is Crystal Kennedy.
All right, so we're all here. We definitely have got a quorum. You know, the meeting going here. You know, when I was first on this committee, which has been over 7 years now, Ernie Hall called the meeting to order, and the first order of business was, how can we figure out a way to increase voter turnout? Because in 2013, the voter turnout was just over 20%. And then the next year it was like 23 or 24%. And we just figured that we had to find a way to increase participation. And so we just started discussing vote by mail. And went and sent members of the election team down to Washington State to observe how they did it down there, and studied other jurisdictions and how they were doing their vote by mail. And when the last time that we had a runoff in a mayoral election was 2015. The turnout for that election was 70,000 voters. And we thought that, hey, that's pretty good. But this year, we had 90,000, almost 91,000 voters, more than 20,000 more votes than we had the last time we had a mayoral runoff. So the reason that we had gone to vote by mail was to increase voter turnout. We have been successful at doing that. An extra 20,000 people voted this year. And I just think that's a good thing. I know there's been challenges, and it was a very, very challenging year to count the ballots, reading the report that Ms. Jones had provided for us. But I just think I want to congratulate the elections team. It was an amazing job that they did to be able to count the record number of ballots that we did receive. And so I tip my cap to everyone on the elections team. We did very, very well. Now, after that, we can get into our new business on our agenda. And so...
I was pointing to me.
Oh, Mr. Gates is here. Sorry, no problem.
Excuse me, Chair. I can't hear a word. And everybody has their mask on. I can't even read lips. Is there any mic in here for me to hear by any chance? I apologize.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, we need to take about a 10-minute break if we could, and we can get the microphone system set up.
All right, we'll take a short break. We're back on recording. This is the Ethics and Election Committee meeting. It's June 30th, 2021, and it's here about 20 minutes after noon right now. We have a quorum established, and let's go to new business. Let's have an election update. Is Ms. Jones, are you giving that, or Ms. McConnell? Ms. McConnell, okay. No? Maybe they're going to tag team it.
Yeah, we are. There's no on. Okay, so am I on? Doesn't sound like it. Is that better?
Yeah,
Okay.
you have to hold it close.
Okay, all right. You know, you don't have to wear masks in here if you don't want. So it's not required. So even though the sign said that, you don't have to wear a mask. So for our election update, we wanted to talk to you today about a project we call the Goldenrod Project. And when I hired Erica last year, I said, you need to figure this out. And I want to have what I would call ballot accountability from this side of the room to the other side of the room. So from envelopes to ballot tabulation. And so we, as those of you who know, who love the board back there, there's approximately 92,000 envelopes listed on the board. But you know that the turnout, as shown here, is only 90,000. So remember, 92,000 envelopes, 90,000 ballots. So what's the difference? Well, the Goldenrod Project tells you exactly what the difference is. And I'm really proud of Erica for working on that, and she's going to tell you about it.
So of course there's reasons why an envelope would not make it all the way to tabulation, and the most obvious reason is that it was challenged for some reason. But I think the easiest way to think about this project is that we had 3 silos previously. So we had the sorter silo, which counted. We had the envelope opening team, which works here in the middle, which counted. And we have the ballot scanners, which count. And I'm not talking votes, I'm talking number of ballots. But we didn't have a connection between those 3. So we would end up with 92 something here and 90 something over there. And it takes a lot of work to figure out how those numbers connect. But now we created what we call a Goldenrod batch cover sheet. And this cover sheet connects the number that comes out of the sorter when we do a fine sort batch to the number that is counted by the envelope openers, which has to match, or there has to be an explanation of why it doesn't match, to the number that is scanned on the scanning system. So this form passes through 3 teams. It starts with, actually it wasn't the sorter team that would fill it out as one of the core team, but it starts with a team that's working from the sorter system, and then it lives in the tray with that batch of envelopes, and it goes to the envelope opening team, and they fill out the middle portion to explain that they've counted the exact number of envelopes that came out of the sorter. And if there was a problem, if an envelope had to be removed for some reason, such as it was empty or it contained more than one ballot, then that is documented here. And then it moves with the ballots that were removed from the envelopes by the envelope opening team, and it stays with those ballots, and it goes to the sorter team, and the sorter team documents on the bottom that they scan, I'm sorry, I don't mean the sorter team, I mean the scanner team. The scanner team documents on the bottom that they scanned the number of ballots that was expected. So it's a way to connect these 3 numbers, which is greater transparency and ballot accountability from envelope coming in to ballot being tabulated. So we were really excited to do this as a pilot project this year, and it turned out very successfully, so we'll be continuing it. And of course we called it the Goldenrod Project because we picked goldenrod paper, but it's really bright, it's very clear when you have a number of batches of ballots in a tray. They're separated by their goldenrod batch sheet, so you can find them. So it worked really well, and we're very satisfied.
So can I just,
Excuse me, but I think Ms. LaFrance has got a question.
I'm going to pass it around so you can take a look at it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. McConnell. This sounds like a great idea. What exactly constitutes a batch?
So,
Good question.
yeah, no, that is a good question. So every envelope runs through the sorter twice. The first time it goes through is what we call first pass. And that is, we compare it to a voter being checked off the register. So it registers that it reads the barcode that is the ballot ID number on the envelope, and it says, oh, that person voted, and it sorts them into a bin, and it's bin 5 through 16. There are 16 bins on the sorter. I don't quite know the difference between, it used to be that we would sort them out by precincts, but we don't need to do that anymore, so now they just go into bin 5 through 16. After the signature verification team goes through and adjudicates each envelope, that first pass batch is now ready to go through the fine sort batch, which is the second run through the system, and that is done by bin number. So all the envelopes that went to bin 5 in first pass, whether they were done yesterday or today or 3 days ago, can be grouped together and run through fine sort at the same time, as long as they all come through from bin 5. We consciously decide to run about 300 envelopes in a fine sort batch. And that number is determined by the number of envelopes that fit in a tray, which is about 300. And that means that the envelope opening team can count those accurately, probably once, maybe twice. You know, when you get batches that are 3,000, it's a lot easier to make a mistake and have to start over. So there's no set number of what the batch number has to be, but we have found that approximately 300 works very well for our system.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. France. Mr. Constant?
At what point are they sorted into ballot types? Because I thought we stored them by ballot type.
Mr. Constant, we do not sort them by ballot type.
Okay.
The ballot type actually doesn't matter for processing envelopes and ballots.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Constant. Ms. Jones?
Mr. Chair?
Ms. Kennedy?
Thank you. I'm just kind of yelling in here. If you need me to text you, if that's easier, I'll do that too, but to get in the queue. But actually I have a question just in regards to the sorting, and Ms. McConnell said that they don't need to sort through by precinct, yet we do that because we get precinct results, correct?
Ms. Kennedy, the precinct results can be drawn from the ballot tabulation system. We don't need to sort and scan the ballots by precinct. That is done by the tabulation system, which knows what precinct each ballot is from, and then can do that.
Okay, thank you. So that's just a separate process then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. I don't see additional questions right now. You have additional things to mention?
I think the last thing we wanted to say about the election, and this project helped that, is that we are then able at the end to balance our envelopes with our tabulated ballots to make our number come out perfectly. And we did that for both elections this year, and so that was very satisfying.
Great accomplishment.
Oh, fantastic. Great news. All right, well, I guess we can go to item B under new business, the election statistics review. It looks like Ms. McConnell is ready to begin that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we put together some statistics to compare all of our vote-by-mail elections. So we had our first vote-by-mail election in 2018. And then we had a special election, but was that citywide or was that just one district?
West Anchorage.
West Anchorage, yeah. So we didn't include the 2018 special election that was done by mail in this review. But we have 5 elections that have been done by mail that were municipality-wide. And so you can see we've compared registered voters, the ballot packages mailed by the vendor, and that is a different number, as you may remember, because code directs us not to mail ballot packages to voters who are in 3 particular statuses at the state level. One of those statuses is UN, which means that there has been undeliverable mail returned to either the Division of Elections, or we provide our undeliverable ballot packages or postcard information to the state, so the state can change those voters to UN. So that's where we have some knowledge that the mailing address is not a good mailing address. The second and third statuses that we don't mail relate to the state's voter purge process. So when you get farther down the purge process, you may go into what's called list maintenance status or purge notice status, where the state has tried to contact you to verify that you live where you're registered and that you still want to be a voter, and you haven't responded, so you can get into one of these statuses. So you're still authorized to vote, you're still on the voter list, but our code says we don't have to mail a ballot to those people. So you can see that that number has varied between 4% of registered voters to 10% of registered voters. We don't mail to those people, but if they call us and say, hey, I want a ballot, we mail them one. Or if they go to a vote center, they are on the list and can vote in person. You'll see the ballots cast and the voter turnout, and Mr. Peterson, as you spoke so eloquently at the beginning of the meeting, we have seen our voter turnout. You don't see the previous poll-based percentages on this sheet, but you can see that we have some good numbers here. And then we also provided some information about how many packages that we end up mailing from the election center that our election workers put together, how many temporary address applications that we received and processed. And this is similar to what used to be called an absentee ballot, when you know you're not going to be home to receive your mail ballot. You're going to be visiting your mother in Idaho, and so you want your ballot mailed to Idaho just this once, not forever and ever. Then you fill out a temporary address application. We send your ballot to Idaho, for example. The number of people who have requested an email ballot, and I will note that this is not the number of people who voted by email. This is the number of applications we received. The number of people who actually returned an email ballot is less than that. The number of ballots issued at vote centers, so basically the number of people who voted in person, the total number of ballots challenged, and the total number of ballots and ballot envelopes that were rejected by the Election Commission. So statistics tell a story, and we thought that this information would be interesting to provide.
Oh, thank you, Ms. McConnell. Ms. Allard has a question.
I do. I was trying to get it through. Oh,
We'll get on the recording.
I know. I gotta respect everybody else. I was trying to get it through to an email, and I couldn't put my words into the email clear enough for Mrs. Jones, and I apologize. I think it might be easier for me to do it this way. So when I had said, how could somebody, trying to get my thought together, an individual cured their ballot. I have all their information. I just didn't send it through the email because I was concerned about privacy. They cured their ballot. Then they got a conference. Well, let me back up. They received a letter saying that something didn't match. I'd have to read it, their signature or something. And then they said, okay, so they sent their driver's license, all their information to the clerk's office. They then got a response from Ms. Yates. And in that email, she said, we've received it. Thank you very much. And then that individual believed that his ballot was cured. Then what happened was, after everything was said and done, I believe it was May 24th, maybe June 4th. I'll have to look at the dates. He then got a follow-up letter saying his vote didn't count. But at that point, it was too late for him to cure the ballot again. And I don't know how that happened or why she said it was cured after. Maybe you can help me out.
So what I will say is that the facts probably matter. So I would really like to look at this specific voter so that we can dig into it
Thank you.
and figure out what happened. So that's number one. So the process you're describing is the exact process. So what happened is there was a signature issue. The voter got an opportunity to cure letter, and then the voter attempted to cure, and that would be when the voter had the driver's license. Brandy Yates is in our call center, so I presume that it came in by email.
Yes, and she confirmed it in the email.
So what happened is Brandy is saying, yes, I received your driver's license in the cure letter. Thank you very much. So then the next step is that Brandy's in the call center. The review and resolution team is the one that handles the cures. So Brandy has to get that information to the review and resolution team. So this is the part where I need to look at this specific voter. Did something happen that the review and resolution team didn't get the information? Did something happen that review and resolution reviewed the information and it wasn't adequate? Did review and resolution make some other error? But I have to look at that, because the next step that happens is that at the public session of Canvas, we present all of the rejections to the commission, and the commission votes on those rejections, and the code requires us to send a letter to those people that their ballot was rejected. So something happened between us sending a letter to that voter that the ballot was rejected by the commission and the email that came in to the elections email. So if you can get the voter information to me, we'll find out what happened.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Jones, and I think that's, and I have it all, and I'll get that to you. I think one of the concerns was that I could understand how a person, after they sent their driver's license and had an email saying, yes, thank you very much, they assumed it was cured, and then they weren't able to get a response timely enough to say, wait, why did now, weeks later, I received something it wasn't? So I'll get you that information, and it'll be much more clear, I'm sure.
And I will let you know that, that is, I think that's a good issue. So the question is this: if you turn in cure information and someone says, thank you, we received that, is that a qualitative response? And if it's not a qualitative response, where is the qualitative response that says, no, that wasn't a cure, or that, so because the response that this person got was way after the fact. It was the letters are due 30 days after certification. There's nothing you can do by then. I totally recognize that. So I think there's a little gap in there, and we probably need to work on that.
Okay.
And I think the question is, and it's a tightrope, and we talk about the tightropes that we walk all the time. So one of the tightropes is, we have voters who, have signed someone else's ballot, and we know they've signed someone else's ballot. And so how far do you go in that opportunity to cure in that situation where someone signed their spouse's ballot, for example, or signed their child's ballot? So those situations, we can tell something went wrong. We can match the signature on the envelope to a household member. So do we give that person an opportunity to cure when we think that someone else already signed that ballot? So we're worried about that. I want to solve this person who got their envelope in. I want to follow up with them and make sure that counts. But the other people I'm a little bit worried about. I'm worried that I'm suborning perjury or encouraging someone to falsify something. So we're walking a tightrope here. And I think the other thing is, if any of you were here on the Canvas date, you saw that it was chaotic. You know, there is so much going on. We take, and that's part of the Goldenrod project and part of the report that I sent you, you know, we are counting every single ballot. And you saw us counting and counting and counting again to make sure that everyone is counted. But it's a lot to do in 2 weeks. And so we're going to ask the Assembly next year. The code says the public session of Canvas can be 3 weeks after the election. And then the certification would be that following Tuesday. So it would be 4 weeks after the election. Total of 3, because we do it 2 now. So 10 days, 2 weeks, moving to 17 days, 3 weeks. And the reason that we're going to ask you to do that is when those cures are coming in fast and furious on that last day, and we're over here trying to count them. And remember, the commission went through them all at their work session, and then we did it again that evening, and I think we were here until like 10:40 at night, 11:40. So I think we need that extra time to make sure that we're counting and allowing voters that extra time to cure those ballots. So you'll hear more about that in the next, when we start talking about some processes and procedures and dates for next year.
Mr. Kozint has a question.
I actually did, and then I think you really caught it, and that is the notion or the process by which your people can come in and cure their ballots right up until the end and before the canvas. And so that's that really interesting, very quickly moving part. It's not just that I've got to get the ballots counted, I've got to get the process set, I've got to get the documents ready for the meeting. It's that people are constantly coming in right up until the end. And that's the part that is, in my value, very important and good for the public to be able to cure right up until the last minute. But also, it's a point that makes it very hard. And it won't always be like that because we're people and we will wait.
It's a very fluid situation, I think would be an understatement. Any other questions or comments about the statistics that we have here from the election review over the last 5 years?
Mr. Chair, this is Crystal.
Ms. Kennedy, go ahead.
Thank you. I guess I have a couple of comments, and then I do have a question too. I think one of the things we wrestle with and are challenged by, though, is the fact that the longer it takes to get results, the more suspicious people become with ballots being tampered with. So I think we have to be cautious about that and keep in mind that, you know, people are used to having results pretty quickly at the end of election day, even though it hasn't been the case, I'd say, you know, since we started with the mail-in ballots. But I think we need to figure out how we can actually go through the process of curing the ballots that need to be cured, and certainly verifying the validity of ballots that we need to verify. But at the same time, the longer that takes, I think we have more of a public relations issue. So I just hope everyone keeps that in mind too. Maybe there's some other way to balance some of that out, and we can certainly continue to talk about potential ways to try to help with that problem. The other thing is, I had some questions specifically on the rejection codes. We had the mayoral runoff election canvas worksheet that's dated May 11th, and there are several rejection codes. So I wanted to ask some specifics about those. And I don't know if you want to do that now during the statistics review, or if that should be part of the elections recap, but I will leave that up to you. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
We can do that now.
Okay, great, thank you. So I'm looking at the sheet, like I said, it was dated May 21st, and I think I picked this up at the Canvas work session, and there's a couple of things in there. There is a code for, it's an I code, says voter is inactive. And at the bottom of that, it just says that, please note there are two inactive codes that are count codes. And I just wondered what the difference is, why we have two different inactive codes, what those are, and what distinguishes them. And then I have a couple other questions.
Okay.
Through the chair, Ms. Kennedy, so the inactive voter is a status at the state level, and one example I can give you of an inactive code that would not be a count code would be someone someone who is in I/FC status. So the I stands for inactive and the FC stands for felony conviction. So that is somebody who was registered to vote but got a felony conviction and is not authorized to vote any longer until they, I don't know the details, but I think you have to, complete your sentence and go through some process to get your voting rights back. So that's an inactive status where there isn't a count. The state information says that, like what you just read, that there are two active statuses. Or can you say what you were reading again? Two count codes.
Yeah, the whole paragraph says that voter is inactive. This code is used when it's been determined that the voter's status and condition code are inactive because he or she is registered in another jurisdiction, requested cancellation of registration, is convicted of a felony involving moral turpitude, died or attempted to register in the past on a questioned or absentee ballot but did not provide required registration information. Please note, and this is in bold, please note there are two inactive codes that are count codes.
Okay, thank you for reading that again. I would have to, so that is a description from the state about their status codes, and I would have to go and ask them what those two count codes are, because I'm not sure, because everything that you listed, felony conviction, those sorts of things would be people who could not be, whose ballots could not be counted for us. So I will ask the state and get back to the entire committee about that question.
Okay, can I follow up on that one, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Barbara's just reminded me that we think that people in purge notice are in
PN. This is PU.
Oh, right. PU. Well, I'm not sure the difference between PU and PN. But people who are in the last stage of being purged from the voter rolls because of lack of contact over, I think it's like an 8-year process, they go into an inactive PU status, but if they walked in, they would be able to vote a question ballot and it would be counted and it would put them back into an active status. So that's probably one of the count codes. But I'll follow up.
Okay, well, that actually helps clarify it a little bit, because then I was wondering how, if we already know somebody has a felony conviction and is ineligible to vote, why would we even have them on the voter registration to where they would even be mailed a ballot to begin with? So, but like you said, if that's part of that 8-year process, then I guess I can see where there's kind of in a gray area, if you will.
I can actually give you a good explanation for that, and that's an excellent question. We get the state voter list 3 times during a regular election, and we actually only got it twice during the runoff election. So we get it early and we send it to our vendor so that they can start prepping. But then about a month later, we get another copy and we send what is called a list of ketchups and yanks to the vendor to say, oh, these people came off the list, take them out. These people changed their address, make a change. These are new people, add them. So the vendor now has a nice, pretty accurate list. But the problem is it's a couple days, due to the timing of everything, it's a couple days before the 30-day deadline to register to vote or to update your registration. So about a week after the deadline, which has given the state time to enter all of the people who wait till the last minute to register or to make a change, we get a third copy of the voter file. But it's too late to send stuff to the vendor, so we end up dealing with the changes in that voter file ourselves, and that's why we have this, new and replacement ballot packages. Some of those are replacements, but some of those are because of new people registering or making a change. So what happened in the runoff is we didn't have time to send that second ketchup and yank file to our vendors. So we sent them one file, and then about 10 days later, we got a second file. There were, I believe, 2 individuals whose status changed from active regular to inactive felony conviction in those 10 days. So the vendor mailed them a ballot, but by the time it came back to us, they were no longer authorized to vote, and their ballot kicked out as void because they weren't on our list anymore because they had been changed to an inactive status. So it was really an issue of the timing and how the process worked with the runoff and exactly when these people's felony conviction went into effect. We would not normally mail ballots to people who are not authorized to vote.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Okay, thank you. Can I follow up a bit on that, Mr. Chair?
I've actually got Mr. Constant and Miss Allard in the queue. Can I go to them and I'll get back to you, Crystal?
Sure, thanks.
Okay. All right, Chris is going to pass. Okay, Miss Allard?
Okay. Kind of like what Ms. Kennedy says, I do have a concern. Oh, sorry.
Like what Ms. Kennedy said, I do have a concern about optics. So the longer we delay the results, sometimes it could be misconstrued. And I understand that. A couple of my suggestions would be, first, I would like it to go back to where individuals have to request the ballot, just like they do in absentee. They submit, I voted by absentee, or you have to do your signature, just like the state. And then the ballot is mailed to you, because then it would be less likely that the ballot would go to the wrong address, or that the person isn't voting anymore. The other thing is, if we do go to extend the period of time, like you've suggested, isn't it possible that we could work that out by maybe having more of the public sign up to hire, more working around the clock? I know it's tiring. I was in the military, I get it. That maybe if we work a 24-hour to get those ballots done and counted, that could help us continue the process without delay. Just a couple of thoughts. I'm not looking for answers, just kind of throwing that out there, unless you have an answer. Okay.
Well, and obviously we'd have to figure that if we were going to do a 24-hour work shift, we probably need a bigger budget because we'd have to hire additional workers, I would imagine, but maybe Ms. Jones has got an idea about that.
Well, I'm not going to address that right now,
Right.
but I would like to address the longer it takes, the more suspicious it becomes, and that we have that vote by mail has somehow caused this. I just want to make sure that you know that the process and the timeline that we're using now is identical to the timeline that we used in our poll-based elections, and the code hasn't changed. with respect to that, the date for the public session of canvass. So by practice, it's always been 10 days, but the code has always allowed it to be 17. But what I do want to tell you is the way the process works, and if you look at the state of Alaska, the election was on November 2nd, and I believe the state certified on about December 21st. So the state process is much, much longer than ours. And percentage-wise, they don't have that many more ballots because we are the biggest city in the state, and most of the people that are voting, it's from, I think we're like 80%. So that's one issue. The other issue, whether you're a poll-based or a vote-by-mail jurisdiction, the thing that you're waiting for is the absentee ballots. So if you have a poll-based election, you wait on all the absentee ballots, and that's what the state did this year. They didn't count any of the absentee ballots. I thought it was like until 10 or 15 days after the election. And, you know, I know some people faulted them for that, but they wanted to make sure that people hadn't voted in person before they opened those absentee ballots. So that's what we did in poll-based elections. We waited the full 10 days before we counted those question and absentee ballots. And so, and then we always certified the 2 weeks after the election. So to some degree, there's really no change. I do agree with Ms. Kennedy and Ms. Allard that it's a public relations issue, and we need to do a better job educating the public about how these processes work. And I think that the answer is every vote counts, every valid vote counts. We want every vote to count. We want voters to have the opportunity to cure their ballots, and we want to get that information out to people so that they understand why it's taking this much time. I think the other part that's hard to say is, well, how many are there? And the answer is, well, we don't know. And I think that's a very unsatisfactory response, and we need to work on that. So I agree with you that it's a public relations issue, and we probably need to talk about that more.
Chair, can I just do a quick follow-up?
I think we need to extend the meeting here for 10 minutes. Can I have a motion to extend for 10?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any objection? All right, we're extended till 10 after 1.
Can you just do a quick follow-up?
Ms.
Thank you,
Priscilla,
Ms.
go ahead.
Jones. Is that okay? Thank you, Ms. Jones. My only thing is, I know that when we do in-person voting, we generally know results pretty fast. I'm not talking about certification. I'm talking about when I go in and I run a race that night or the next day, next morning, I'm pretty sure where I stand because the calculations go a lot quicker. So I would disagree with waiting till certification. That's okay, right? And then that's it. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Did you have another question, Ms. Kennedy?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I just wanted to go back to the Kansas worksheet and the rejection codes. There's one that specifically says rejection code MOA, not registered in the municipality of Anchorage, and there were 28 people that voted in that. So I'm assuming they kind of got caught up in that time frame that Ms. McConnell was talking about too, where they might have been initially on the registry from the state, but by the time we actually got a ballot from them, they were literally no longer considered eligible. So anyway, if that's true, then just say yes, and I don't need any other explanation. But
Not exactly, Ms.
interesting.
Kennedy. For those voters registered outside of the MOA or MOA, those voters voted a question ballot at a vote center. and they were not on the voter registry, and so when they got to the vote center, they had to vote a question ballot. And when we do our work here after the election on question ballots, they were registered in another location. That's why they weren't on our list. But even so, that question ballot registers them to vote in Anchorage. So, for example, if someone voted at a vote center and they were not registered in Anchorage, let's say that they're registered in Uktiavik, and they voted in the regular election, we have something called a floppy. We took the floppy from that question ballot envelope, we got it to the state, we asked the state to process those, and they did process them. That person was registered for the runoff because the regular election was on April 6th. April 6th. So that was more than enough time to be registered to vote in the May 11th runoff. But we had to get that information to the state. We got it to them. We asked them to enter it. The person from Uktiavik was now registered in Anchorage, and she actually got a ballot from us for the runoff. So MOA means you are not registered in Anchorage, you are not in the database.
Right, okay. Well, and my question was really about why they would even get a ballot to begin with, but like you said, if they go to an actual voting center and request a ballot. So technically then there's not a way for somebody at the voting center to actually determine whether or not someone is registered in the municipality. And they have to wait till it goes back to the voter center to actually get verified. Is that true?
Well, close, Ms. Kennedy. The vote center workers know why someone is voting a question ballot. We have like 10 rules why people vote a question ballot. You can have a name change, you can have an address change, or you're not in the database. And so that's when you vote a question ballot. So the voter knows why they're voting a question ballot too, because the worker tells them. But the worker doesn't make any judgments, and the workers never have made judgments, even when we had 121 polling locations. The rule is everybody gets to vote, and we joke that if you're a green alien and you show up at a vote center, you get to vote. If you're 17, you get to vote. The workers at the vote centers do not make judgments about the voters' eligibility. And in fact, that's why I remembered the inactive purged notice on the one voter. So someone voted, they were not in the database. When we looked them up, they were inactive purged, but that's one of those inactive that is a count. And of course, the vote center workers wouldn't know that. Those are all judgments that have always been made by the election commission and election officials at the vote center after the election.
Okay, thank you. That helps. But I think we should be careful about saying that every ballot counts, because some really don't, and they shouldn't. But anyway, that's just kind of a passing comment. Thank you, Ms. Jones. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You are correct. Every valid vote counts.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Mr. Constant.
Just two notes. I was at a church that did a get out the vote activity, and they had a military member who went to vote and turned out wasn't registered to vote. And so that caused them to be registered to vote, but they only found afterwards, right? They didn't know, and so they thought they were registered to vote here. So that's a very specific example that I seen at a church that did a get out the vote activity. And so that's an exact issue of a person who's not on the voter roll. They show up, they vote that question ballot. The question ballot is rejected, but then they're now a voter in the municipality, which is great for those people who didn't know. And the one concern I would have about overnight elections counting is that errors start to happen in the middle of the night when people are really, really tired. And so it might be possible to come up with enough people to do the work But just like our business must end at midnight, I think there is some very strong argument for why we need a fresh group of people counting ballots so errors don't get made in the process.
Either that or you need to look for night people.
Fair enough.
So, okay, let's see, maybe we should go down to item C under new business, elections recap. Is there anything additional that we haven't already covered from the certification report that the clerk came up?
Mr. Chair, I think we had a couple of questions, written questions that came in, and I think we had one on best practices. So what are the national best practices for elections, and are we implementing those? And can we compare and contrast the similarities and differences? Well, I'm not going to go into all of that, but I'm going to give you a little bit here. So Erica and I did a little research for this question, and we found 3 lists of nationally recommended best practices. And Erica, you can start with the shortest list.
Okay, so the National Vote at Home Association has a list of 6 best practices for voting systems, and we are doing 4 of them, partially doing 1 of them, and not doing 1 of them. So what we are doing is extended early voting. As you know, we mail ballots out 21 days in advance, and our vote centers are open 9 days in advance of Election Day. No excuse vote at home ballots. Of course, we mail to, over 90% of registered voters, and we've talked about the people we don't mail to. Fair ballot curing policies. We contact every voter who has a challenged ballot and give them an opportunity to cure. And I think Ms. Jones mentioned, we are always looking to improve, but certainly our policies are fair and equitable. Multiple accessible return options. We have 18 drop boxes that are spread out throughout the municipality. We're always interested if people want to give us feedback on, where we might need more or moving them around. We have vote centers. We have the mail. We have coming to the election center. So there's lots of ways to return a ballot. So those are the 4 that we're doing. One that we are only doing partially, but actually working on, is ballot tracking. We do have the daily voter list, which is available to people who want it, but I don't think your average voter really knows about it. But we are certainly investigating and working on whether we can improve opportunities for ballot tracking and for individuals to learn exactly where their ballot is. So I would say we're doing that partially. The one that they recommend as a best practice that we are not doing is prepaid postage. We do require that if a voter wants to return their ballot through the U.S. mail, that they put a stamp on their ballot. And if they have a cure and they're returning their cure by mail, they would have to put postage on that as well.
And then, I told you that we had 3, but in the, idea of time, we'll just take a look at this other one here. This one has 9 steps for local election officials, and they are coordinate with the USPS. And I'm going to tell you, we do all of these except 1, so we'll get to that one. Coordinate with USPS, design ballots and envelopes that are easy to use, implement robust signature verification, provide secure drop boxes, provide election day voting centers for in-person voting, consider using a professional printer and sorter, count ballots at a centralized secure facility, invest in high-speed centralized equipment. So I said there was 1. There are 2 that we are not doing, include postage prepaid return envelopes and have a comprehensive system to track ballots. So you can see there's a few more here, but the same 2 we're not doing.
Well, and we've been discussing doing the ballot tracking, and so we may, by the time the next election rolls around, be doing 8 of those 9 items. So
Correct. There's this list had a couple of steps for lawmakers, so I'd like to share those with you. There are 5 of them. I really think you're only going to be interested in a couple. One is join the Electronic Registration Information Center, which is called ERIC. The state of Alaska participates in ERIC, and I'm going to tell you, Erica and I, if that's punny or not, are going to investigate joining ERIC because we think that is a good recommendation. It says allow counties to accept ballots postmarked on election day. You do that. It says allow voters to request absentee and replacement ballots online. We do not do that, but when we do our code review, we'll discuss it. I admit doing stuff online worries me. And then the last one is allow early in-person voting options. You do all that. So I think on a review of this, overall, as far as best practices, I think the elections team is doing a good job with best practices. We probably should discuss in more detail the issue of prepaid postage, since we're hearing that, but I think we can do that at another meeting. And as Mr. Peterson said, we can look into some more about ballot tracks. And Erica and I will get back to you about the electronic registration voter information.
All right, fantastic. Well, we're down here to the last couple of minutes. I guess we could open this up.
I have another question that came in.
Okay.
And this question was, in light of the forthcoming changes to assembly district boundaries to accommodate a 12th assembly member, what are your plans for voter communication? And I'm going to just kind of skip ahead here. What about other plans to address other issues raised in this election? Candidate bios, voters being able to track their ballots, and ballots being mailed to people out of state, and the signature verification process. My take is some good questions. I think we do need to work to improve voter education. I think this is probably about the 3rd or 4th time we've said that today. We did a really great job in 2018, and that was in my answer to this question before Carolyn Hall was at this meeting, who ran our 2018 voter education campaign. But because of resources, we did very little in 2021. We had some radio spots and some social media, but no TV and no in-person presentations to community councils. In light of the specific answer, in light of the changes to the assembly district boundaries, I think the team needs to develop a communication plan about these changes. And I think we're going to have to work closely with the assembly about that as this goes forward. Then on the second part of the question, signatures, we did do a social media campaign for the runoff to tell people how to fix their signatures. Use your official signature, don't use your car's grocery store signature, look at your driver's license. If your signature's changed, include a copy of your ID. I think we need to do better at that and get that info out earlier in other types of materials. Next question concerned biographies. The Juneau, the city and borough of Juneau, includes bios in their materials. We're going to do that this year, require candidates to, well, they're not required. We're going to request them to include a bio. We'll get that in the other information. The last question was about ballot tracking. You know, we're going to continue to work on that. We think we can do more for our voters about helping them track their ballot rather than calling us to find out if their ballot was received. But the last issue was out-of-state voters, and I think we need to do a better job communicating both to the public and to our out-of-state voters. And we did have a couple of ideas about this. One of the best practices was joining ERIC, and we think that if we could find out directly about voters who are registered in other jurisdictions out of state, then maybe we could talk to the assembly about a code change that says we don't mail ballots to voters who we've determined from Eric are registered out of state. So we'd start a new code. We can't get that information from the state, so that would just be a muni code. And then if Eric and I have some other ideas about how we can implement that, but I think that would help us. Again, I was talking about the tightrope that we're walking. Voters who live out of state that are military, college students, are working out of state, or are sunbirds are still qualified registered voters and are entitled to vote in our election. But I think we all know that there are other voters who have moved out of state, have no intention of returning to Alaska, but just didn't notify the state that they want to cancel their registration. And this is a way to maybe walk that tightrope. But we can provide you more information about that at a future meeting. And that's it. I think that's all the questions.
All right, fantastic. Well, we probably need to extend for about 3 minutes here so we can do public participation. Do I have a motion?
Second.
All right, we'll extend for 3 minutes. Is there anyone of the member of the public that wants to participate? Go ahead, Jeannie.
Here.
Is it working? Can you hear me? Okay, I've set my timer. My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. I follow the public process. When the public process is done appropriately, decision made by the governing body is more likely public interest. First, I think it needs to be pointed out. By the way, you know I attend a lot of election meetings and so forth over the years, and not just here, but in Palmer, Wasilla, Matthew Borough. But there's one significant thing that I have to give some credit to the Municipality of Anchorage in their elections, and deserves to be mentioned now. When you do your elections, and then when you, before certification, you do provide some opportunity, I'm not saying completely, but some opportunity for the public to know of the voters if there's a problem with their vote, and contact is made out there, and there's a place for getting it corrected, and particularly there is an election commission public canvass where even then public can come in and have a challenge the denial of their vote to be counted before it goes over to the assembly. The Municipality of Anchorage has been doing that. It varies from time to time over the years, but over with Palmer and Wasilla and so forth, and the situation has been basically after certification, the public gets to notify, hey, wait a minute, your vote wasn't counted for X reason. But at least I have to give some credit to the Municipality of Anchorage, but it has varied from year after year, election after election for their local election, that there is an attempt made, but it's not as 100% foolproof and needs to be improved. Okay, but that needs to be said. Second is, I didn't appreciate when the orange sheets were passed out to the assembly members here at the committee, and the public has not clear what those orange sheets were. These reports that were rather extensive, and I appreciate the comments and reports given by staff here, Barbara Jones and others, but it would help us all in saving time that it's all in writing, and the public and you all see it, and grasp at what is being said, instead of having crammed into a very narrow window of a meeting, and there's no clear picture of, and also an opportunity to question back and forth. And then this. I have year after year, and I'll say it in my closing remarks, this, in essence, that since 2012, 10 elections, every one of them, there are reasons, I have to say, is no one won the election, everyone lost. There has been failure, and continued failure. There's variations to that failure, but still it's a failure. And one can just ignore it, and which have been done over the years, but it's a plain fact and it's true. Thank you very much, with 1 second to spare.
Our meeting is adjourned.